Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
A game of flashlight tag. Written by William Dalphin. Performed by Jeff Clement. Featuring Luke Fischer and Steve Taylor. Audio production and music by Jeff Clement. When I was 10 years old, I played a late-night game of flashlight tag with a bunch of neighborhood kids. If you don't know what flashlight tag is, it's the same as tag, but you play it in the dark. The person who is it gets a flashlight, and rather than tag you physically, they shine the beam on you, and then they have to yell the name of the person they see with it in order to tag them. It was really cloudy that night, and most people had their curtains drawn, so it was the perfect level of darkness for hiding in. The side of the street my house was on was skirted by a broad length of woods. That was basically the boundary for our side of the game. You could run through any yard, even go across the street and run through their yards, but you weren't allowed to hide in the woods because it was too difficult to find anyone in there, and it was very easy to trip over tree limbs or end up with poison oak. Of course, this rule was frequently and flagrantly ignored when people got too close to being caught. They'd duck off into the bushes for a few seconds or run behind a group of trees to evade capture. I don't remember who was it at the time, but I was hiding in a backyard 2 houses down from my house. The family that lived there had a little playhouse for their daughter, a swing set, and a doghouse, but no dog. I would periodically duck into the doghouse whenever I saw the flashlight's searching beam approaching. Those of us trying to hide from the it person liked to spook each other in the dark by jumping out of nowhere and making each other scream, giving away our positions. I thought I knew where the it guy was, but I got comfortable hanging out on the swing set. Suddenly, a person with a flashlight came around the corner of the house and angled their beam almost directly at me. I leapt from my seat and ran for the edge of the woods. When I got there, I hovered in case they saw me and planned to yell at me for cheating. The beam of light seemed to explore the swing set where I had been, then came in my direction, but there was no sense of hurry at all to it, and I wondered for a second if maybe I'd attracted the attention of the homeowner. Most people on the block knew we were out playing flashlight tag, but you never could be sure that someone wouldn't get nervous if you stayed in their yard too long. So I crouched down in the grass and waited to see who it was. They shined the light right in my face, and I tried to cover it with my hand to avoid identification. The creepy thing was, they never said anything. They just shined that light on me. "You got me," I exclaimed, hoping that if it was a homeowner, they'd realize I thought they were the flashlight tagger. Then I realized that 2 houses down, people were yelling, and there was the it guy's flashlight chasing them around. I stood up and tried to see who was shining the light on me. They just stood there, not moving, not saying anything. I felt a little freaked out.
"If you don't want us playing in your yard, I'll go tell them it's off limits, okay?"
The person started walking toward me. Something didn't feel right, so I started walking toward the edge of the yard. The person just kept shining the light on me and coming toward me, so I ran. When I looked back, the person with the flashlight was running too, and they were an adult, much bigger and much faster than I was. I felt scared, not sure why this person was chasing me. I ran toward where the other kids had been, but they were gone now. It just seemed to be me and the person with the flashlight. So I turned right and ducked into the woods. I dropped to the ground and shook some nearby bushes in an effort to confuse the person, then shimmied under a ring of thick bushes and curled up. I saw the flashlight in the woods nearby, looking around. I heard the person's footsteps, breaking sticks and crunching on pine needles. I didn't know what was going on, and I just wanted to get back to all the other kids. Eventually, the flashlight wandered deeper into the woods and I crawled, quiet as a mouse, back to the edge of the trees, and then got up and ran toward the street. I was immediately caught by the person who was it, but I didn't care. He yelled loudly that I was now it, and I tried desperately to tell him that there was someone else with a flashlight wandering around in the woods, but he took off in the dark yelling,
"No tagbacks!"
Don't go in the woods!
I yelled, but no one responded. Of course, anyone who heard me had probably just assumed I was talking about not cheating at the game, but I was sincerely worried about the adult stranger wandering around in them. Of course, now I had a flashlight of my own, so I thought I should go and see if I could find out who that was, just to make myself feel better. I went back behind the house I'd come from, and a bunch of laughing shadows scampered out of sight into neighboring yards. I ignored them and headed straight for the trees. I couldn't see any other light in there, so I thought, maybe he went home. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, but I couldn't imagine any women trudging through the woods at night. So I went about playing the game again, albeit anxious because of the lingering thought that there was someone wandering in the woods who didn't seem to be playing the game with us. I ran across the street and chased people through the backyards there, but after a while I found the lots empty and realized that they must have gone back across the street. I ran back over and was exploring the Beach's backyard. Mrs. Beach had a clothesline with a bunch of drying sheets on it, and her daughter Charlotte liked to hide among the linens and stay close to home in case she got too scared of the dark. She was only a year younger than me. I thought I heard something at the tree line, so I went over and was waving the flashlight around into the woods.
Stay out of the woods!
I remember yelling. I waved the flashlight back and forth a couple more times, then saw someone off in the distance. I held the light on whoever it was. They were about 20 yards into the woods and hard to make out, but it looked to me like Charlotte. Charlotte had brown hair that her mother insisted on keeping shoulder length. We always dressed dark for flashlight tag, and Charlotte liked to wear a deep purple sweatshirt, so it was usually easy to tell when you'd found her.
Charlotte, I see you!
I yelled. She just stood there. I continued to hold the light on her and call her name, but she didn't seem to move. She stood there, partially obscured by a tree, and looked at me. The distance between us was enough that I couldn't see if she was blinking or not, but she had her head propped at an angle, like she was looking around the trunk at me, with her mouth hanging slightly open. Every now and then she sort of twitched or squirmed. It was a real freaky kind of movement.
Charlotte, come out of there!
I yelled.
Everybody! Charlotte's it, but she won't come out of the woods!
Some kids, including my friend Dustin, appeared behind me and formed a chorus, yelling at Charlotte to come out.
Do you see her?
I asked.
Yeah, she's over behind that tree. Charlotte, get over here.
Dustin shouted. But she wouldn't come.
Charlotte, are you okay? Get over here, dummy.
Charlotte seemed to stand up straighter than before, and then disappeared suddenly behind the tree. We could hear movement, but it seemed to be going away rather than toward us. Dustin started shouting Charlotte's name again and trudged into the woods after her. Before he got too far, I grabbed him and gave him my flashlight to take with him. I was scared again, because this all seemed surreal. While Dustin searched the woods, I went to Charlotte's house and knocked until her father answered.
Mr. Beach, Charlotte won't come out of the woods, and I'm worried about her.
I told him. I wasn't sure if he'd take me seriously, but he rolled up his newspaper and disappeared into the closet behind the door for a moment before returning with a huge flashlight strapped to a car battery.
Show me where she is.
He told me, so I led him to the woods and pointed to where I'd seen her.
She was right there,
I said.
by a tree, but she wouldn't come out, and she was acting like she was sick or something.
A bunch of the other kids kept calling Charlotte, and I could see Dustin's flashlight beam moving around through the trees. Mr. Beach went in after him. They explored the woods for a good 15 to 20 minutes, and Mr. Beach started to get real angry. We heard him yelling very loudly for Charlotte, threatening her with all sorts of punishments if she didn't get back in the backyard that instant. The game was over by then, and we kids just stood there in the Beach's backyard, among the linens, and watched. Dustin came running back out of the bushes with a dead flashlight. Eventually, Mr. Beach came back out of the woods.
Game over, kids.
He said.
Get inside. Ask your folks if they can help me and bring flashlights.
We all ran back home. My dad went out with 3 different flashlights. My mother went and turned on all the lights in the back rooms and opened the curtains and shades to help illuminate the backyard. I sat on the couch, all upset, and she eventually came back and hugged me. And she sat with me while I told her about the person with the flashlight chasing me, and how I thought maybe Charlotte had run into him. Mr. Beach had gone inside and called the authorities to report a missing child. The police brought huge lights and did a march through the woods, checking very thoroughly. But they didn't find her. My mother told my dad what I'd told her. He told an officer, and I ended up giving a statement. They went to the house 3 doors down and knocked, but the folks that lived there had been asleep and didn't know who would have been in their backyard. The police asked all up and down the neighborhood, but nobody claimed to know anything. The other end of the woods came to a back road mainly used by logging trucks. They found Charlotte 2 days later, on the other side of that logging road, at the bottom of an embankment that ended at a stream. She'd been stuffed into a drain pipe. Her neck had been broken, and she'd been stabbed multiple times afterward. My parents weren't the ones to tell me about it. They thought it would upset me. I heard all the details from Dustin at school the next day. That night was the most awful thing our town had ever experienced. On account of what happened to Charlotte, the police blocked off the logging road and spent months tracking down loggers and truckers who frequently used it. There was a curfew for months, and we were told not to play flashlight tag anymore. We didn't argue. What leaves me shaking to this day is the memory of Charlotte's face hanging out from behind the tree, looking at me. Sometimes I wonder if at that moment I had witnessed her death. And I wonder if it had almost been me.
pray, for devils have no reason. Satan waits to curse your ways. Have you seen it in his eyes in the sunset? Have you wondered if he's laughing when he plays? Kansas, the Devil Game. This is a set of instructions for how to speak with a devil, which, as those of you with any sort of brains at all might note, is a patently moronic proposition on the face of it, one likely to culminate in any number of thoroughly unpleasant fates. Honestly, it would probably be smarter to publish your credit card number on Facebook or take up a career in crocodile wrestling. But then this isn't going to stop you, is it? Not if you're sincerely interested, at least. Technically, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance you'll walk away scot-free. And that seems to be reason enough for some people to decide that it's a good idea. Especially if you're the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking, scare junkie type, or the desperate type. Which brings me to a point of clarification I ought to make. This is not a manual for making any kind of Faustian bargain. You know, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although, if it happened to be brought up in conversation, he certainly wouldn't be one to refuse. Following through with such a foolhardy bargain, however, would necessitate removing some of the protections which you will put in place for your conversation, and I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last about 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if performed correctly, should only allow the two of you to talk. This perhaps begs the question of why exactly would you want to speak with the devil in the first place? Maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities. But for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid. Short answer is, he knows things. Things that some of you may have a deep vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not omniscient or anything. Much as he might like to pretend otherwise, he's not God. But he's definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably wouldn't be able to predict when the next world war will happen, or tell you the cure for cancer, but he could very well be able to predict the winning numbers of tomorrow's $500 million Powerball drawing, or tell you what deadly, undiagnosed condition might be affecting one of your loved ones. Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't just go around giving out winning lottery numbers to anyone who asks, and trusting any sort of information obtained from a being commonly described as the father of all lies is liable to land you in a worse situation than you were in when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding something out and you've exhausted all other options, there is a way to try to get accurate information out of the guy. You see, like so many of the more urbane villains in popular culture, the devil has a bit of a penchant for games and gambling. Of course, the reason he likes them so much is that he almost always wins. Unless you happen to be a fiddler named Johnny or being represented by Daniel Webster, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you. But if you're determined enough to want to face the risks and the long odds, there's a certain game the two of you could play to try to win the information you need. First things first, though. We'll start off with a description of the summoning process, then get into the rules of the game, some tips for how to play, and finally, of course, the inevitable litany of arcane shit that might horribly go wrong. In order to contract your conversational partner, you'll need to go to a church at midnight. Doesn't matter what kind of church, large or small, old or new, liberal or conservative, just as long as you're sure it'll be empty. The last thing you want is for some preacher to walk in on you while you're in the middle of this, well, for the sake of the preacher's well-being, as much as your own. The process will probably work best if you try it on a new moon, or a full moon, or Friday the 13th, or Halloween. The actual day is less important than the psychological effect it has on you. As long as you don't try it on Christmas Eve or something stupid like that, you should be fine. The time is important, though. You don't have to start or end your ritual at exactly 12 a.m. Greenwich Atomic Time or anything. But as a general rule of thumb, you ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up by no later than 10 or 15 after. Show up a lot before midnight if you don't know how to get into where you're going. Shockingly enough, though, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night. At least if there's no one there to watch over them. And remember, we want empty. Got it? Okay. There are, of course, certain things you need to bring, and certain things you can't bring. For this ritual, you will need a full can of salt. You won't use all of it, but it's always better to have more than you need than to have less. 7 candles, red or white being preferable. Something to light the candles with. You would be shocked how often people forget this. Occult ritual or not, they aren't going to magically light themselves. A length of red string, rope, yarn, or thread. A full-length floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you'll want to find one of those already present in the church. They're a bit unwieldy to be lugging around with you during a break-in. However, if there really aren't any there, you'll have to bring your own. You might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, a flashlight, and any sort of tools that might be necessary to secure your entrance into the church. You will not be permitted to bring in any electronic or timekeeping devices. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, PDAs, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, etc., etc., etc. Seriously, it's worse than the SAT. If you're one of those people that has your smartphone practically wired into your brain, don't worry. You can bring those things with you to church as long as you leave them outside the room in which you'll be doing the ritual. If you brought a flashlight, helpful for finding your way around without attracting unwanted attention, leave that outside too. Also, don't bring in any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it pertains to the Abrahamic religions. And yes, if those gothy black cross earrings you're wearing, hanging right side up, they count. If you have any kind of holy symbols like that with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going in totally unprotected. In fact, most of the supplies with you are not for any sort of devil-summoning ritual, but for your own protection. Old superstitions and folk magic remedies to guard oneself from evil. From what I know of it, the effect's mostly based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that would work just as well. If you'd like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in the order to test that theory, feel free to experiment. However, for anyone without a psychotic death wish, I'd recommend sticking to the ritual as follows. Once you're sure you have all the right supplies with you, make your way into the church and find some place to set up. It can be anywhere from the main sanctuary where services are held, to a Sunday school classroom, to a walk-in supply closet, as long as you have a sufficient amount of open floor space and are certain not to be disturbed. Set up your mirror first. This is where the devil will appear when you summon him. As such, you mustn't complete the summoning until you've laid down certain wards around it. First, surround the mirror with an unbroken circle of salt. If the mirror is hanging on a wall or door, lay down a semicircle around it instead, making sure the salt touches the wall at both ends. Then, wrap your red string around the mirror several times. The color red, especially red string, is symbolic of protection in the folklore of many cultures and religions. This is also why red candles are a good idea. Speaking of the candles, set them up around the outside of your circle or a semicircle of salt, spaced at relatively even intervals. No, you do not have to get a measuring tape and make it exactly perfect, but do at least try to make it look as though it was set up by someone old enough to be trusted with matches. Light the candles in a clockwise fashion, being careful not to disturb the salt. If you break the circle, you'll have to start all over again. Once all the candles are lit and burning strongly, your protective wards are complete. You are ready now to proceed to the actual summoning. To do so, you first must get the devil's attention and demonstrate your resolve by performing some sort of sacrilegious act in the holy space. Turning a crucifix or cross upside down is fairly conventional, but it's not the only option. For example, I know of a kid who once fulfilled his requirement by scribbling obnoxious graffiti all over a painting of Jesus hanging in his Sunday school classroom. The nice thing about turning a cross upside down is that once you're finished your encounter, assuming you've survived it in one piece, you can just flip it right side up again and no one's the wiser, sidestepping the relatively minor but still irritating risk of having your Sunday school turn into a reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition for the next month and a half. After you've finished doing whatever offensive thing you decide on, shut all doors to the room and turn off all of the lights so that the space is lit only by the candles. Face the mirror and stare deeply into it, concentrating on your desired outcome. There are no incantations, no arcane strings of Latin you have to recite. Just look into the mirror and wish as hard as you can for the devil to appear there. After a few moments of this, when you feel ready, close your eyes and count to 10. Then open them. If all has gone correctly, you will no longer see your own reflection. You will be looking at the devil, or at least looking at the way the devil has chosen to appear to you. Chances are he won't look like the conventional red-horned demon with goat legs and a pitchfork, nor any other sort of terrible apparition. No point in scaring you off now. Better to lure you in, make you feel safe. To that end, he generally takes on appearance of a fairly average, nondescript human being. If anything, he's prone to vanity and will lean toward the more attractive end of the spectrum. The only really frightening part of him now will be his eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot hide the sinister gleam smoldering deep within them, the malevolent amusement and hunger, like the eyes of a spider contemplating a fly struggling in its web. They're supremely confident, those eyes. Confident and without pity. Don't look into them too deeply or you'll begin to feel helpless and paralyzed with dread, losing your hope and your will to fight. Since you'll probably be just standing there staring at him in shock for a few moments, having on some level expected for the ritual to fail, he'll initiate the conversation by asking you what it is you desire from him. If you can gather your wits enough to string together a coherent sentence, you should respond with something like, "I wish to challenge you in a game of question and response." Even if you don't get the words exactly right, he'll know what you mean, and he'll accept your request with a wide, predatory grin of anticipation. He's been playing this game for a long time, you see, and he's very good at it. Most humans, on the other hand, are very bad at it. This gives him a chance to, at the very least, thoroughly mess with your mind. And at most, well, We'll save that for the litany of shit that could go wrong. You'll have to play it very smart to avoid justifying his expectations. The general rules to the game are very simple, with a few caveats that can make things more complicated. He'll begin by asking you a question. He always initiates the game. It can be anything from a piece of obscure trivia to a riddle to an extremely personal inquiry. Don't worry, you won't be immediately plunged into hell if you get the answer wrong, or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he won't even tell you whether you got the answer right or wrong. After you've answered his question, you get to ask him one in return. Now, here's where the consequences of your response come in. If you answered his last question correctly, he'll respond to your question as honestly and accurately as he is able. However, if you answered it incorrectly, he is free to lie to you as he sees fit. Perhaps if you asked him something you're better off not knowing, he'll tell you the truth about it anyway. More likely, he'll feed you the most insidious, damaging lie he can come up with. Either way, after he's responded, he'll ask you another question, and the process will repeat over and over again until you decide to call it quits. Now, you may be sitting there thinking that it sounds fairly easy to get the information you need. All you have to do is wait for a question you can answer correctly, and then take that opportunity to ask him what you really want to know, ignoring everything else he's said. Well, it's not that simple. The devil will never give you an easy question, one that you can be completely sure of the answer to. He may instead give you questions that you have some vague knowledge of, that you think maybe you know the answer to, but aren't really quite confident, thus forcing you to endlessly second-guess yourself, obsessing over whether or not you can trust the information that he gave you next. Perhaps you'll think what he said was a lie, wish it was a lie, but be eternally consumed by doubt, unable to fully convince yourself that you were wrong. Or perhaps you'll have to make a huge choice based on the information that he gave you, and be tormented by fear and indecisiveness as you realize that your fate, and perhaps that of others as well, rests entirely upon whether or not you were able to correctly recall some arcane piece of trivia that you don't even remember now. You'll never remember the exact questions the devil asked you, by the way. That would make it too easy for you to go back and check on the responses. Or maybe instead of testing your knowledge, he'll ask you something personal. Something you even lie to yourself about. You'll answer back to him thinking you've got the question correct. No, I don't resent my sister. Yes, I would turn the money into the police. But he'll know better. He'll know better than you do that you're lying, and he'll lie to you in return. And you'll believe him. You'll believe him until you are no longer able to deceive yourself, and by then it might be too late. Or maybe he won't give you a chance to get an accurate response at all. Maybe he'll just ask you endless strings of completely impossible questions, making you more and more frustrated and disheartened as you realize you'll never be able to force him to tell you the truth. Questions like, what was the exact height of Mount Everest in centimeters in the year 1666? Or, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Although, knowing his sense of humor, if he ever asked the latter, he might consider African or European a correct response. There are a couple of ways to short-circuit this particular strategy, however. Additional rules and courses of action that make the game more interesting and prevent you from being stonewalled completely. Although, in all honesty, he probably wants for you to try one of those options anyway. The first option is to ask him a riddle instead of a question. If you somehow manage to stump him and he answers the riddle wrong or gives up, he'll be obligated to give you a truthful response to your question. If he answers the riddle correctly, once again, don't worry. He won't pounce on you like a sphinx or drag you into hell. What will happen is that he'll get a pass, allowing him to lie in response to one question he would otherwise be obligated to answer truthfully. Honestly, if he gets a pass, you might as well just give up and quit the game right there. It's nearly impossible to determine when he's telling you the truth under the best of conditions. Adding another layer of complexity by constantly trying to figure out when and if he used his pass, it's about enough to make any normal person's brain explode. There's no way. Just forget it. The second option is for you to take a dare with him. If you accept it and vow to follow through, then once again he'll have to answer your next question truthfully. If you choose instead to reject it, he'll get another pass. Now, before you freak out and reject the whole idea completely, you should know that he won't ask you to do anything overtly dramatic or unspeakably evil, like blow up a hospital or murder somebody. As a rule of thumb, most dares won't involve direct loss of life or any major felonies. However, they certainly won't be easy. Inflicting severe pain on yourself, doing something that terrifies the shit out of you, cutting off a treasured relationship, publicly humiliating yourself or someone you love. All of these things and more, things you might not even be able to imagine, are completely on the table. If you're willing to go that far, to put yourself in that kind of position, you'll get your answer. However, if he manages to come up with the one thing you know you simply can't or won't do, well, then again you might as well just quit. One last thing. Don't think you can just tell him you're going to do something and then not do it. If you accept a dare and then don't follow through with it, let's just say there will be consequences. Just suck it up and keep your promise, no matter what it was. Trust me, you're better off that way. Finally, when you've either gotten the information you wanted or given up on it completely, you may end the ritual by simply thanking the devil for accepting your request, bowing politely at the waist, and bidding him farewell. The surface of the mirror will seem to swim and flicker for a moment, and then you'll be looking at your own reflection again. Only when you are absolutely certain that you're looking into your own two eyes again, may you turn away from the mirror, flick the lights back on, and begin dismantling your protections. Now, and this is important, even if you haven't gotten the information that you wanted, you must end the ritual in this manner before 66 minutes have elapsed. Well, I suppose technically you have 66 minutes and 6 seconds. Subtle, right? But if you're seriously going to try to cut it that close without any kind of timekeeping device, you're probably screwed anyway. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you keep to this time limit. I'll save the reason behind that for the end, but don't skip ahead. I still have a few important tips on how to play. 1. Be very careful what sort of personal information you give out. Try not to talk about yourself, especially your emotions and problems, any more than absolutely necessary. This guy knows human psychology like the back of his hand, and he will get inside of your head. It's like talking to Hannibal Lecter. Give him enough to work with, and even if you don't believe a single word he says, he will still find ways to fuck with your mind like nobody's business. If anything he asks makes you even remotely uncomfortable, do not hesitate to lie through your teeth. There will be plenty of other questions. 2. On a similar note, try to keep the game on track and moving briskly. Unstructured interactions of any kind are to be avoided. Chances are that at some point he'll try to draw you off on a tangent, discussing something that fascinates you, analyzing a response you've given to him, or finding some other excuse to speak at length without moving the game forward. This is not only a waste of valuable time, but also another excellent opportunity to mess with your mind. 3. If you choose to give him a riddle, use one you've made up yourself. If your riddle has ever been written down anywhere at all, from the pages of The Hobbit to some long-lost tome of ancient magic, you will already know the answer. That said, it still has to be a legitimate riddle with an answer that makes logical sense from some angle. You can't just ask something like, "What's green, has 10 legs and hops?" and then claim for some inexplicable reason that the answer was marshmallows. Nor can you ask him a straight question like, "What have I got in my pocket?" He probably knows that anyway. There are no hard and fast rules to determine whether a riddle makes sense or not, but you're a reasonable human being. Your ancestors ate from the tree of knowledge. Please, for the love of crap, use common sense. 4. If you choose to take a dare, there's a slight chance that the devil will ask you to do something seemingly easy. Deliver a letter, for instance, or scribble a 10-digit number in a public restroom stall. If he does ask you for something like this and have even a shred of common decency in you, do not accept. Chances are that he's using you to further some sinister plot, one liable to ruin a lot of lives and harm a lot of people. Who knows? Maybe you're the type of person who really doesn't mind throwing an unknown number of total strangers under a bus to find out what you want to know. But at least be aware that it is what you're doing. 5. Last but not least, be very aware of the time. It might be helpful to do some practicing beforehand and get a feel for how long an hour is without a watch. The devil will probably put off discussing the things you're most keen to find out for as long as he can, and as you near the 66-minute deadline, he'll start trying harder and harder to distract you, captivate you, and otherwise keep you playing until it's too late. He'll string you along, feed you little glimmers of false hope, keep you thinking, "Just a few more minutes, I'm almost there." Don't fall for it. Don't go over the limit, no matter what. Now, you might be thinking that this game really doesn't sound all that dangerous so far. Threats of psychological damage rarely seem to carry the same weight as threats of physical damage, even though the costs are often just as great. Hate to burst your bubble, but the game is far from safe. There are plenty of ways for you to seriously screw yourself over, both physically and mentally, not to mention spiritually. And it is with these that I will conclude, in the vain hope that they may make some sort of impression. First, while you are speaking with the devil, do not let him out of your sight. Keep staring into the mirror no matter what happens. He will undoubtedly try various tricks to make you look away. You'll hear noises behind you, feel eyes on the back of your neck, see shadowy phantoms writhing in the depths of the mirror. A cold breath will blow upon you from behind, smelling like the crypt. A deep silence will settle, only to be interrupted by a loud smack directly behind your head, giving you about the worst jump scare you've ever had. Hell, the devil may even abandon a measure of his own dignified facade and give a sudden jump of feigned shock, shouting loudly and pointing behind you with a very convincing look of terror on his face. Whatever he might test with you, you must not look away from him. If you look away, if you lose sight of him completely, even for 1 second, you will look back at the mirror and find him gone. Well, not gone. Out of the mirror. In the room. With you. Exactly how much of your body the police will find the next morning and what state it's in will depend entirely on the sort of mood he's in. The same thing goes if you break any of the protections you laid down before beginning the ritual. Interrupting the circle of salt, letting the red string unwind, knocking over a candle, or letting one go out. Any of these things will free him from the mirror, and then, well, you're all a bunch of creative horror junkies. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. On a different topic, you may reach a point in the game, probably after a long series of maddeningly impossible questions, where the devil asks you the deceptively simple What's your full name? You must not give it to him. Names can be things of great power. Although the devil will, of course, already know your name, telling it to him yourself is akin to inviting a vampire into your home. Your name is deeply synonymous with your own inner self. Thus, giving him your name is powerfully symbolic of giving him yourself. If you're foolish enough to make this mistake, all of your protections will be for naught, and he'll seize upon your unwitting offer with malicious glee, stealing away your soul and dragging it back with him into hell. At least this way the police will find a complete identifiable body. As a matter of fact, your vacant shell will be totally unblemished, seemingly having dropped dead of sheer terror. Last, but certainly not least, there's the matter of what happens if you go over the time limit. Now, this is arguably the worst thing you can do. You won't think so at first. The devil will give you no indication that you've in fact exceeded the time limit, and you will conclude the ritual as if nothing had gone wrong. Perhaps, as the devil's image in the mirror trembles and gives way, you'll see a particularly nasty, triumphant smirk flash across his face. But this will be easily dismissed as your imagination. You'll turn the lights back on, gather your belongings, and go to leave the room. But when you open the door, you will see nothing. That's right, nothing. Just a flat white void extending infinitely in all directions. Only the room which was reflected in the mirror will now exist. Incidentally, if you turn back around to face the mirror again, you may catch a last glimpse of your own reflection. Perhaps it will even turn and favor you with a smirk and a cheeky wave before sweeping out the door into the perfectly normal church hallway outside. As you may have already figured out, you yourself are no longer in the church. Your soul is now trapped in the mirror, and the devil has taken the liberty of possessing your body, now that you are no longer using it. Pound on the glass and scream all you like. You'll never get out on your own. And no exorcist can help you. But don't worry, it's not like you're in hell, right? At least, not necessarily. What you have to understand, see, is that a human soul, stripped bare of its flesh, is a deeply volatile and vulnerable thing, especially when trapped in the land of the living. You are now an entity of purely mental properties, and as such, the barriers between what is real to you and what is imaginary have been completely dissolved. As you fill that reflected room with your anger, your sorrow, your fear at being trapped, these emotions will begin to coalesce, giving form by your mind. If you're not particularly imaginative, these creatures may not be too terrible, may not be able to inflict too much horror and pain. With time, you may even be able to teach yourself to get rid of them. If, however, yours is a mind haunted by monsters, a mind that is vibrantly creative and imaginative and more than usually twisted, well, there's no telling what horrors might come clawing their way out of the maelstrom, tasting sweet release from the confines of your subconscious, hungering for your terror and suffering. They will refuse to be banished, dragging you, kicking and screaming, into an endless positive feedback loop of pain and fear. Needless to say, if you're a regular patron of websites like this one, you're probably pretty well fucked. There's only one way to find release from the mirror and the world that you've created therein. They say that if you call to the devil once more and ask him to free you from the mirror, he'll be willing to take you out. For the usual fee, of course. Who knows, maybe if your imagination is twisted and powerful enough to create a personal hell that leaves you begging for the real thing, those talents might be put to good use. There are over 7 billion people in the world, after all. Even the devil himself can't be messing with all of their minds at once. Talented help is always appreciated. Of course, the corollary to your being trapped inside the mirror is that the devil now gets to do whatever he wants in your body until sunrise. At around that time, your body will mercifully dropped dead from the strain of the possession. Autopsy will probably identify the cause as some kind of coronary event. Don't get too relieved, though. He's perfectly capable of stirring up plenty of trouble in those few hours. For instance, he may decide to do something big and dramatic, like purchase a large meat cleaver and go on a murder spree, starting with the names in your address book and working his way out to complete strangers if he has time. Or perhaps he'll focus on only one person, someone who trusts you completely, using your persona to get him or her alone and vulnerable. And then, well, no need to describe it here. Once again, I'm sure you can think of a few things. Starting to see why I call this the worst outcome yet? Of course, there's also a chance he won't lay a finger on any of your loved ones, instead deciding to do something a little more subtle, more insidious. Like drop off a few nondescript, unmarked packages on certain doorsteps in a dangerous part of town, or locate a particular dusty, aged yellow text in the storeroom of your local library and intentionally misfile it in the young adult literature section, or whisper 7 very choice words into the ear of a distracted-looking young redhead waiting for the 3 a.m. subway train. Or maybe he'll decide that in this age of waning superstition, not enough people are getting interested in his games, and the knowledge of them is in danger of being lost. Maybe he'll decide he needs to get the word out a bit more, do a bit of networking, attract some new challengers. Maybe he'll take a quick peek at your browser history, see where the impressionable, curious minds are hanging out these days. Maybe he will even write a quick tutorial in modern parlance rather than some inscrutable, obsolete, demonological text posted on the internet and see how many bites he gets. Maybe I really shouldn't have gone there. But if you made it this far without shying, a little twist at the end isn't going to put you off, is it, dear reader? I'm sure there are plenty of intrepid adventurers among you with burning questions you'd like answered. And you're all a smart bunch. You know the pitfalls, you know the conventions. You live and breathe this sort of thing, don't you? There's no way you'd fall into any of the obvious traps, right? You're not some Dick or Jane off the street, after all. You'd be bringing a whole new level of competition. You would... Oh, excuse me for a moment. I think I hear someone calling for me. What? You want out that badly already? It must be one hell of an imagination you got on you. Perfect.
The Dead Poets Game. Written by an anonymous author. Performed by Peter Bishop. The following is a set of brief instructions on how to play the Dead Poets Game. Most of you have probably never heard of this ancient phenomenon that circled around England in the late 1800s during the Industrial Revolution. This practice can still be used by certain people, but I must warn you that what you will partake in is extremely dangerous. You must follow all instructions perfectly, or else your life will forever be endangered. Now, you might be asking yourselves, what is the Dead Poets Game? In the late 1800s, stories of ghosts and goblins were circulating all throughout Northern Europe. Everybody only thought of these spirits as mere fairy tales. It was, of course, all too true when one night at the London Theatre, someone performed this exact game in front of a large audience. This man was a psychic who was mostly renowned for his unbelievable talent of precognition. Alexander Kingsley was his name. He mostly performed magic tricks and various other acts of illusion that even I can't figure out. One of which was when he seemingly cut off his own foot and then reattached it in only 60 seconds. Of course, I'm just getting sidetracked. With the craze of the ghosts and demons becoming famous throughout the world, Alex used this to his advantage. He was going to play a little game that he had heard of and wanted to test out if it was real or not. The items needed are a candle, 2 glasses of wine, a table, and 2 chairs. You'll see why later. Alexander heard the tales of what would happen if he played the game and thought it would be a good idea in order to bring in profit. You see, at the time his tricks had, well, gotten a little stale, if you know what I mean. The idea of actually summoning a ghost on stage was the perfect idea to reel in a crowd. Soon posters and advertisements were plastered all across London. Come and see the mysterious Ace. For tonight at 8 o'clock he will summon the undead from their peaceful slumber. Come and see for yourself at the London Theatre House. Of course, this was back when literally everyone was a gullible idiot, although nothing has really changed, now has it? At that very night, Alexander, or Ace, was going to perform the game improperly. He wasn't acquainted with the key rules one has to follow. The rules. 1. You have to be alone. 2. You have to do it in the place where someone has died. 3. You have to take everything seriously. Alex was disrespecting these rules to the core, and the punishment for not following these rules are, well, you'll see later. The setup you have to follow is that you have to be in the vicinity of where someone had recently passed away. In fact, you need to place your table on the exact place in which they had died. You need to put your chair where the victim's head was pointing, and the other where the legs were. It also matters who died. It needs to be the body of a poet, hence the name. A poet can also be described as a calm, well-spoken, and nice soul. So if your husband was a very humble and collected person, then you can play this game. The reason for this is because when you'll contact the spirit, it'll often take the shape of a soul trapped in that area. If you want to have a nice conversation with the spirit, you wouldn't want it taking the shape of a demon, now, would you? This brings us to the first rule. Be alone. If you aren't alone, then the spirit may possess the poor soul who didn't sit down in the head chair, as I call it. And trust me, it is very hard to save a soul from this fate. If the other person gets possessed, the ghost will have full control over the body. Sometimes, if it's a demon, then your friend may do unspeakable things to you and anyone around him or her. The same rules apply if you don't sit down in the head chair or if you don't have the table placed in the right spot. If you're like me, at this point, you've probably predicted the fate of Alexander and his audience. But trust me when I say this, not following the rule in which you're supposed to act in a sensible manner is the worst one of them all. And poor Alex was a 19th century magician with brightly flamboyant colours for clothes. Not following this could haunt you for the rest of your days, but the fact that Alex was breaking all of these rules was even worse. To properly play, you must lock yourself in the room, closing all the blinds, and be sure to do it at night. No light must be in the room at this time except for the faint flickers of light emanating from the candle that you need to place on the table. Take out the 2 wine glasses and pour both glasses with the alcohol of your choosing. This symbolizes a peace offering to the spirit, showing that you mean no harm to him or her. I should remind you that you must have no form of technology inside the room. Also, you must make sure that you have no way of contacting anyone else in the outside world. To start, you must call to the spirit that you mean no harm to them. You pour their glass and raise your own and take a sip. If you have done this correctly, after lowering your glass, there will be someone sitting across from you. At this point, you must not display any signs of fear in your voice or your facial expressions. You must not provoke the spirit in any way. You must act sensible. To start the game, you must say, "I wish to start a match." The ghost will usually nod and raise the glass. The spirit will be taking the appearance and personality of the deceased body of your choosing. Remember that. You must treat this spirit as if it actually is the body in the room. If you don't, Then you will be met with weird looks and eventual frustration and anger. Of course, nobody in their right mind would want to mess with a ghost. To play, you have to say what letter you want to be, either A or B. To say it, you must say, "I strip you of the letter," say your letter. If done properly, the spirit will take another sip. I should remind you that every time the entity takes a drink, you must too, for this will be your timer. When both glasses are empty, the spirit will leave. If both glasses are uneven, the spirit will not leave until you have finished. Now again, you might be thinking to yourself, that isn't so hard. All I have to do to finish is to finish drinking, and then he or she leaves. What's the big deal? Well, I can certainly tell you that you would want to spend as much time away from this spirit as much as possible. This creature is purposely trying to get you drunk so that you can reveal your deepest, darkest secrets. It can find out about your personal life, your job, your family, your relationships, etc. This is just a way so that the spirit can enter your mind and slowly dissolve it. Just by choosing choice words, it can cause some people to commit suicide. Some entities have powers and abilities that we are yet to fully understand. Angering, pleasing, or agitating a spirit like this can have dire consequences. The game plays like this. Player A will ask a question, and player B will have to answer it. After the spirit answers, it will take a sip. Then the letters will alternate. Then you will be player B. The spirit will ask a question and then take a sip. You can ask any question you want, and so can him or her. You keep alternating until you both run out of wine. When this happens, whoever is player A when the wine runs out automatically wins the game. If you win, the spirit will raise his or her glass and walk into the shadows. Remain seated even when he's returned to his rightful place. Blow out the candle, turn on the lights, and exit the room. It sounds relatively easy, doesn't it? Of course, what happens when you lose is a whole other story. If you lose, then the spirit will blow out the candle. Turning on the light is probably the best defense mechanism against the spirit. Ghosts aren't drawn to light and often avoid it. Still, that doesn't mean you're safe. This spirit may start following you through your life. Every time you go into a dark room, you'll see it just out of the corner of your eye. Whenever you look into a mirror, you'll see it standing right behind you. It'll stalk you and hunt you down until you finally muster up the courage to say these words. "This soul is yours. It is yours to do business with." If you say this successfully, then you black out. You will wake up in a similar room to your own, except darker and stranger. There's no doors or windows, just a bed. This spirit now has your soul, and it can choose to do whatever it wants with your body. Think of this strange realm as a sort of waiting room. As soon as someone else wants to play, you will be summoned and be forced to play. If you lose, then you will be forced back into that room, and you will have to wait again. Sounds pretty fucking easy, doesn't it? Usually, you are the only person in this dimension, and until you are summoned, nobody else can enter. A year before the phenomenon had spread to England and been popularized by Alex, a violent prisoner named Pear played the game. Using the dead body area of his unlucky cellmate, he had heard of this game and had heard of the effects. He thought that if he lost and was summoned in somewhere like England, he would be able to make his escape from life imprisonment. So, locked up in this French prison, he performed the game. He purposely lost, not knowing how horrible his fate actually was. He spent a whole year in his hellish prison, screaming in agony, banging on the concrete walls as he got no response from anyone or anything. He went insane. He became the very definition of a demon. He wasn't able to form sentences. He couldn't self-harm. He couldn't think straight, and all he could think of was leaving that hellhole. Then, one cold November night, Alexander released the demon from his cell. With no real way of a human form, and with an overwhelming audience of bodies to possess, Per could not control himself. He was transformed into his natural body, except he had aged exponentially. He stank of feces and urine. His clothes were tattered and worn out, and he was screaming like a rabid dog. He was foaming from the mouth. He attacked Alex and took his body. Per had become Alex. He ran out of the theatre. Crowds were running after him, some calling him a genius, and others calling him a monster. Alexander automatically lost the game. He didn't follow the rules, and thus his fate had befallen him. And so, if you've learned anything from this, do not take the risk by playing this game. It will ruin you. It will destroy you. It will dismantle the very fabric of your world. If you do choose to play this game, I suggest playing alone.
First, I need to apologize to you. I am so sorry. I'm coming to you in my time of need. Please, help me. That's it. That's all I ask. I don't know what to do or where to turn. Please, just help me. That's all I ask. My name is Andrea, and I'm a single mother. I don't tell you this like it's some badge of honor, and I'm expecting cookies, milk, and chocolate-covered snowflakes like most of the others in my social circle would. They want your pats on the back and recognition. I just want some of your time. I see motherhood as a burden. Necessary, yes, but still a burden. My son's name is Jesse. He's 11. That's 5th grade for the math haters. Jesse started the 5th grade this year like any other kid would. There was a little bit of trepidation and lots of excitement. He was a happy-go-lucky sort of kid, full of life and energy. All that changed after he met Stan on Tuesday. Stan was a late addition to Jesse's class, a transfer student from another district. Jesse's teacher sat Stan next to Jesse. When I picked Jesse up after school on Tuesday, he told me that Stan was his new best friend. He wasn't acting like himself, though. He was pale and sweaty. I took his temperature, but he wasn't running a fever. I asked about his day, and all he would tell me was that Stan was his new best friend. "Stan's my new best friend," Jesse would say. "I know, I can't wait to meet him," I'd say back. "Mom, Stan is great. You should meet him. He's my new best friend, the best in the world." We must have had the same conversation 1,000 times that night. When I tucked Jesse in bed, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. He put his little hand in front of his face and wiggled his index finger, telling me to come closer. I bent over him and he put his hands to either side of his mouth. You know, the little kid way of telling a secret. Well, I turned my head and he whispered something into my ear that chilled me. At the time, I didn't know why it chilled me, but it did. He whispered, "You believe me, right, Mom?" I sat back up and looked down at him. "Believe you about what, honey?" "Stan," he said. "Stan's my best friend." I nodded and took his temperature once more. Again, he wasn't running a fever. I went to bed, but couldn't really sleep that night. On Wednesday, when I pulled up to the school to drop Jesse off, he got this really weird look on his face and told me that he didn't want to go in. "Are you feeling sick?" I asked. "No," he said. He was chewing out his bottom lip like crazy. This was something else I'd never seen him do. "No, I need to go to school." He opened the car door and got out. No goodbye, no I love you, nothing. He trudged up the front steps of the school with his head down. I let off the brake and turned away to drive to work. A little boy was standing right in front of my car. 2 more seconds and I would have run him over. The boy was pale with a mop of blonde hair that was almost white and bright blue eyes. He knocked on the hood of my car twice, waved once, and walked up the stairs to school. When I picked Jesse up after school on Wednesday, he looked a lot better. He was a tiny bit paler than normal, but he seemed happy. He told me all about his day. He told me about dinosaurs and music and math, and then he told me about recess. And then after math period, we had recess. Mom, you'll never guess what I did today at recess. Tell me, I said, smiling to myself as I'm driving. I'm thinking tag, football, keep away, all the things I remember the boys doing at recess when I was that age. Something benign, something normal. I joined a church! I frowned at this. A church? At recess? Jessie nodded. The Church of Stan. I thought that it must be some sort of new make-believe game that the kids were playing. What's the Church of Stan? I asked. It's Stan's church, Mom. Jessie laughed like I was the silliest person in the world for asking that question. What do you guys do, though? You know, as members, I asked. Lots of stuff. Today, though, we just listened to Stan talk. He was saying some funny words, and I got sleepy and dozed off. A bunch of us did. I pulled into the driveway at home, and we got out. Was that it? I asked. Things sounded weird for sure, but the kids didn't seem to be doing anything wrong. Stan gave us flyers, too. Jessie pulled out a crinkled-up piece of paper and handed it to me. It was a piece of manila paper with 3 words written in black marker. Church of Stan. Again, weird, but nothing wrong. I just thought that the boys were playing make-believe. I was wrong. When I picked Jessie up after school yesterday, I could tell that something was very wrong with my little boy. He looked panicked and scared. What's going on, honey? I asked, reaching out to feel his forehead. No fever. We played the soul game today, he said. Jessie's head was on a swivel. He couldn't sit still. He kept looking all around as we headed home. The soul game? I asked. Jessie just nodded and kept trying to look everywhere at once. Beads of sweat dotted his upper lip. What's the soul game? I asked. Jessie shook his head no and said nothing. Jessie, what's the soul game? I asked. I told him I didn't want to, but he said he wouldn't be my friend anymore if I didn't play. Who wouldn't be your friend? Where were the teachers? Jessie started breathing harder, but still answered. It happened in the church, he said. Then he whispered, Teachers aren't allowed in the church. The Church of Stan? I asked. Jessie nodded, and a tear slipped down his cheek. What's the soul game, Jessie? I'm your mother. You tell me right now and I'll take care of everything, I said. I can't tell you, Mom. I can't. The rules are bad. They're so bad. What about Stan? I asked. Will Stan tell me the rules? No! Jessie screamed this and scared me half to death. Don't ask him the rules. Please don't, Mom, please. I pulled into the driveway, scared and confused. Promise me, Mom. Promise me, please. Jessie was bawling now, terrified. I took him into my arms and rocked him. I hadn't rocked him like that since he'd been in kindergarten. He fell asleep in my arms, and I carried him inside. I took him straight to his room and got him ready for bed. He just needs sleep, I kept telling myself. All he needs is sleep. I put him to bed and ate dinner alone. I checked up on him around 9 when I went to bed. He seemed to be sleeping well, so I decided to go to sleep. I woke up to him screaming at the top of his lungs 18 minutes after midnight last night. I ran to his room, but he wasn't in bed. I turned on the light and Jessie came flying out of the closet like something was chasing him. He latched onto my leg and kept screaming. I tried to calm him down and ask him what was wrong at the same time. He wasn't making any sense. He kept screaming about the soul game. He was impossible. I kept asking what that was, but he wouldn't tell me. I tried to put him back to bed, but he would have none of it. Finally, I just took him to my room, and he slept in my bed. Jessie fell right to sleep. I was lying on my side watching him, stroking his hair, when his eyes popped open, and he stared right into mine. I'll tell you the rules after school tomorrow, lady, he said, then he closed his eyes. What was going on with my kid? In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I rolled over to my side and stared into the bathroom. You know, when you're on the edge of sleep, sometimes your leg will kick and jerk you awake? Or you'll imagine you're falling, or that you've just tripped over something and you get jerked awake? That happened to me all last night, only I kept being ripped from sleep by seeing something in the doorway to the bathroom. Every time my eyes would start to slip shut, I'd see the dark outline of something large in the doorway and jerk awake. Of course, nothing would be there, and I would start falling asleep again. The outline would appear in the doorway once more, but it would be closer to me, like it had taken a baby step. Over and over this happened until morning. This morning on the way to school, Jessie seemed out of it, lethargic. I felt the same way. I was even more exhausted. I thought of asking Jessie about what he'd said right before he fell asleep, but couldn't. I was afraid it would send him into hysterics again, so I left it alone. I drove him to school, and he didn't say a word the whole time. He was acting like a robot, listless, unemotional. I got a call shortly after dropping him off to come pick him back up. He'd vomited in class. When I picked him up, he was the same. I asked him several questions, but he only gave me grunts in response. The plan at home was to get him changed out of his dirty clothes and then take him to the doctor. He didn't say anything until we pulled into the driveway. "Can Stan come over today?" he asked. He stared out the windshield at the garage door. "You're not feeling well, honey, and do you really want him to come over?" I asked. I wanted to meet this kid, but it didn't sound like Jessie wanted him over. I, however, wanted to get to the bottom of things. "Yes," Jessie said. "Okay," I said. "Do you have his parents' number?" He already asked his parents, and they said it was okay. "We have to wait until he's out of class, and I'd still like to talk to his parents." "Okay." Jessie got out of the car, and we walked into the house. "You have their number?" I asked as I shut the door. "No," he said. I started to ask him how I was supposed to call them if I didn't have their number, but someone knocked on the door. I was standing right next to it. I opened the door, and standing on my front steps was the pale little boy with the blue eyes and mop of white blonde hair that I'd almost run over on Wednesday. A little girl stood next to him with the same complexion. "Yes?" I asked. "Hi, Driz," the little boy said. "Is Jessie home?" The little boy standing on my front porch shouldn't have known that name. It was my nickname from college, created on a drunken night amongst my girlfriends, shortened from Drizzy. "No," I said. "That's fine," the little girl said. "My name is Devin, and you already know my brother's name." "Stan," I said. The little girl covered her mouth and giggled. Stan smiled and shrugged. "It's really quite simple. Rule 1, don't walk past mirrors in the dark. Rule 2, don't leave any doors open when you go to bed tonight. Ask your son what Rule 3 is, and remember, a creak means you're falling behind, a rustle means you've almost lost. When the lights go down, hopefully you won't see the dark shadow standing in the corner of the room. Hopefully you won't hear it breathing as your eyes shut and you begin to drift off. And if you hear a bang, well, hopefully you never hear a bang." Stan turned and walked away with his sister. I stared after them both and shook my head. I wouldn't play their stupid game. I walked into the house and found Jessie sitting at the kitchen table crying. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I heard a bang," he whispered. My mouth went dry. "When does the game end?" I asked. "It doesn't," he whispered. "It never ends." My heart started beating faster. "What's the third rule, Jessie?" His face fell, and he sucked in a deep breath. "Rule 3. Knowing all 3 rules makes you a player." My stomach dropped. "What happens if you lose?" "When it's dark, you'll hear them coming. They like to let you know when they're getting close." "Who?" "Stan and Devin," Jessie said. "They'll reach out through the mirrors and open doorways and drag you through." "How do you win?" I asked. "You win if you tell more people the rules to the soul game than the person that told you does." Like I said, I am so sorry. But thanks for helping. Really. I'm going to enjoy my newfound freedom, and I hope that you enjoy your night. Give Stan and Devin my best.
There are numerous games that circulate the internet. Most are written for fun. A rare few are written based on real experiences of those who found the worn corners of reality. Some are trying to quantify it into a recipe as a way to process their experience. Some do it as a way to prove to others that what happened was real. Some malicious few do it out of self-pitying schadenfreude. I'll let you decide the motives behind this game. The first step happens when you dream. You will dream of your current or former college campus. If you've never been to school, then a college campus nearby. You will know which one in the dream. There will be a party around you, a wild party that can only happen when you are young and reckless. But you will not join in, merely drift around the edges. As you take in the sights, you will find a narrow hallway. There will be signs outside each door. Perhaps it will be movie titles, like an impromptu movie screening for the party, or just subjects that the classroom is used for. This is not important. What's important is that one of the doors will bear the title Darklands. You probably won't go in at this point. No reason to go into this unknown room while there is still so much to take in. If you do go in here, I don't know what will happen to you. Maybe nothing. Dream nonsense, because you are all by yourself. Maybe you will hear an announcement from the radio, from the DJ, or perhaps in other ways, whispered from party goer to party goer. Text messages written on the bathroom wall, yellowed flyers on the bulletins. The content will remain the same. The first session in the Darklands is free if you bring a friend. Quote unquote. You will wake up with a nagging feeling that will last for the whole day before fading, just as you have forgotten that you ever dreamed this particular dream. It will come again. Details will change, the attendance shifting as your past and present mingle, the campus of the school twisting into different endless hallways as the party sprawls out. It will be the same school. The dream will end as you stand in front of a door, separated from the party, down one of the endless hallways. It will be the same door. You will wake up before you open the door. Now, you have a choice. You could do nothing and wait for the dream to fade, ignoring the nights in front of that door until you no longer feel the call when you awake. Or you could find a friend. Your friend either needs to be an anchor or a seeker. If neither of you is a seeker, you will never find the door. If neither of you is an anchor, you will never return. What makes a seeker or an anchor is different for each pair. It's a question that only you two can answer. So answer wisely. Take nothing with you besides your clothes. Empty your pockets. Take your keycard and keys if need be, but you must leave them outside once you find the door. You will need to go to the college campus of your dreams. No other will work for you, even if all, in their own way, lead to the Darklands. You may wish to indulge in chemical lubrication to help with this next step, but I must warn you against this. If you are too sloppy, you will likely find yourself on the wrong end of security or never making it to your goal. Once you enter the campus, ignore any dorms and make your way to the biggest building. You may have to arrive early to avoid the doors being locked. Wait until nightfall, after the last class empties. After that point, you and your friends will go down to the lowest floor. There, you will search, circling the hallways until all you can think about is the stained tiles, the flickering fluorescent lights as your world narrows down to just these echoing steps. Then you will find the door. It will be the same as in your dreams. Once you cross the threshold, you can't turn back. Don't look back, for you will not see the hallway you have left. Instead, you will see the radiant gap between our world and the Darklands. Seeing that pure light, your nerve may snap and you may try to run to the door. You will never reach the door, instead falling forever between. Turn away from the light and face the darkness. You will see nothing at first, with you and your friend slowly extending your hands out, feeling around you. You will feel the dark cool of moist rocks, the dripping of what feels like water echoing through the air. It is not water. Do not drink it. If you drink it, you will be forever bound down here in this dripping darkness. Ignore your parched throat from waiting and pumping adrenaline. If you continue to face the darkness, your eyes will eventually adjust. Pinpricks of light will guide you through as your hands scrape against the rocky walls, navigating the edges of stalagmites that will draw blood if you aren't careful. After jostling against your friend, shoulders slamming into each other as you are squeezed and pinched by rocks, you will finally find relief as the passage widens out into a large chamber. The pinpricks of light will give dim illumination as you reach out, trying to feel your way around. Eventually, you will look at them and realize that they form shapes. A vase pouring out water. Twin fish. A silhouette of a ram. The glaring head of a bull. Two crude people mirroring each other. A crab. A lion. A woman with hair as long as her dress. A set of scales measuring nothing. A scorpion. A drawn bow and arrow. And a goat head. Maybe the Seeker will explain the significance. Maybe they will not. It does not matter. If you choose to walk towards them, reach out your hand and touch those small lights. You will leave. You will never return, never dream of the Darklands again. You may be happy with what you find on the other side. You may be disappointed or filled with despair. You may find home. You may never be allowed to return home again. But at least you will be spared what is up ahead. If you can ever be satisfied with being spared. Ignore the wall and look to the floor. You will find faint lights there, dimmer than the ones on the wall. The image should be of a man grappling with a snake. If it isn't, then I have no more advice for you. Stand carefully on the edge around the man-snake and press your hands down. let your blood drip. The floor will fall open, and you will feel your hands grabbed, pulling you down. You may struggle pushing away, but the slippery floor will never support you. You will slip, fall, and be dragged down. The grip will feel warm, unbearably warm, like hands that belonged to a man who had been wrestling for ages. Your tumble down will be stopped by your friend as you both pin each other in place. The walls here are warm, and you can feel them constrict and release around you. Their enormous ribs framing your world. The darkness here is absolute, so you need not bother with your eyes. If you panic here, if you struggle, if you scream, you will never leave. You will remain forever stuck, or you will gain the attention of Nira. Then you will find your warm flesh bathed in acid, and your bones will join the rest that is stuck in the gullet. Take a deep breath. Take it again. Quiet your friend if you must. Lead them in your breaths. You will have to work together to carefully squirm and writhe in unison, to allow yourselves to slip down during the release, to shelter between the bones of the unlucky during the constriction, so you will not be impaled. For even those soft bones can burrow deep. Do not worry about time. That is not important here. It will feel like hours, days, eternity. Keep your calm and slide down. Eventually, the last constriction will push you through, and you will fall. Your landing will be hard and painful, but you still must go on. There is still no light. The bones will crack under your feet. Now you will hear voices. They will promise you answers to questions you have always had. Partial answers that beg for you to stop, to drop down in despair, to turn to them in wonder. Promising you all if you turn and leave the path. Smoke will choke your lungs, leaving you in coughing fits, leaving your head swimming. In this darkness and smoke, you will see things vibrant and almost real. I don't know what you will see, but I know that they are not real. They are only what might be or might have been. Or at least, not any more real than the darkness and crunching bones. Do not stop moving. Even as your coughing shakes you, even as your words spill from your lips from what you see. It would be best if you moved forward as much as you can understand forward in this darkness. Do not stray from this forward, or you will be lost in this darkness, seeing visions and crying out to those who walk along the path, seers who go unheeded. That is the fate of those lost in Delphi's cave. Eventually, the darkness will wane as the smoke drifts away. Your path will grow clear of bones, and you will step out into a city. You will see in the light, the blue light that seeps from the ground, from the sky, from everywhere, bathing everything. The light will sting. Now, you can rest. Wait for your eyes to adjust. Just be careful of the snakes. for they are coiled on every surface. Their venom is deadly, and they are quick to strike. Their bodies are the only color you will see in this city beyond the black walls. Move slowly, let them slither away from you, the rainbow shredding into black. As your eyes adjust to the light, you will see the city in black walls, ruined, absent of all life beyond the snakes. You will probably run your hand on the polished stone, feeling the carvings. You may even be able to make out individual carvings that represent lions or people, but their greater meaning is lost on you. You will not understand the words carved into the stone, made out of angular lines before an alphabet. You and your friend are likely to be silent. One of the two may try to speak, but your words will drift away, falling away into the silence. As your eyes look up, you will survey the city's wide streets and think of the skyscrapers dwarfed by these walls. You will wander. It does not matter which way. All roads lead to the center. All snakes slither to the center, gliding along with the tiles as you enter the plaza, a courtyard in which two thrones look down. The snakes will not enter, their tongues flickering out in your wake, remembering your scent as you walk away. Two figures will sit on the twin thrones, wizened, dwarfed by their thrones. You may feel strong for a moment, tempted to rush them until you realize that even the dwarfs of this city are far taller than you and your friend. Their skin is the same shade of the city stone, from what little you can see from their draped clothes and the blue light that falls away from them. You will not see their faces hidden away from your eyes. You will never see them. They have been forgotten. Now, reach into your pockets. If they are empty, you will find a dagger, and if you didn't empty them, you will find what you brought. How the Queen and King of Dur will judge you then, I do not know. You will feel the stone handle, the sharp blade. You will feel the engraving of a snake and a man combined into a single being throughout the dagger. You will pull out the dagger, feeling it grow and lengthen. Your friend will be too busy looking at the king and queen, the friend that followed you down, that you escaped from the gullet with, that led you away from the voices, that scared the snakes away while you rested. The friend followed you when no one else believed or that they loved you enough to ignore their disbelief. You must not hesitate. You will be judged poorly if you do. You will walk up to them silently, unnoticed, and bury the knife into their back. You may have to withdraw it out and in again, spilling their blood on those dark stones. The red turns dark in the blue light as they shudder and fall over. Do not stop until you hear the last rattle, the last intake of labored breaths. Dip your hands into the blood. Kneel on the stone as you lift your hands. What passes now is different for everyone. How you are judged, weighed on inscrutable scales. Regardless of the answers to your question, you must now pick up your friend and carry them out regardless of what you are given. Walk between the thrones. Walk past the dark city into the blue light. You will leave the Darklands and find yourself back in that school hallway. Your hands will be clean, and your friend will be standing nearby. They will look like nothing happened, that they were never dead in a Titan city. But you will look in their eyes. If they are an anchor, their eyes will be lifeless, dull, and they will never laugh, smile, frown, or cry again. Your wrists will feel heavy, and scars will form in time in the shape of gray metal chains. If they are the seeker, their eyes will not recognize you, looking beyond you. They will laugh, smile, cry, and frown, but never at what is around them, forever roaming inside themselves. You will feel lighter, like a puppet whose string is being pulled. The scars will form on your back, making the shape of white wings. Next time, you will not need a friend, gaining what you lacked from them. Next time, you must pay the price of a second session. Are you willing to see what is beyond? Are you willing to go back deeper into the Darklands?
Chilling tales for dark nights.